A crowded luxury restaurant. One cruel sentence. "We don't serve people like you here." The room froze. A deaf man stood in silence, ignored, until a young black waitress stepped forward and answered him in sign language. That moment changed everything.
3, 2, 1.
The Silver Oak Lounge gleamed like a promise under the New York night sky. From the outside, its golden letters shimmered on polished black marble, casting a glow across the cobblestone street. Inside, chandeliers dripped crystal light onto mahogany tables and velvet booths. Every detail of the decor whispered exclusivity. Wine racks stretching to the ceiling, waiters gliding in pressed uniforms, and the faint music of a live jazz trio in the corner. For most guests, stepping into Silver Oak was like slipping into another world, one where money softened edges, and the problems of the outside city stayed beyond the revolving doors. But for Janelle Brooks, the restaurant was not a dreamscape. It was a battlefield of survival disguised in luxury. At just 25, Janelle had already learned how the world measured her. Not by her intelligence, her patience, or her quiet resilience, but by the shade of her skin and the way people thought it dictated her place. In Silver Oak's hierarchy, she wasn't a woman with dreams of teaching, of making a difference in special education. She was simply the Black Waitress, a title people never said aloud, but stamped into every glance, every whisper. That evening, she pressed her palms against the counter at the service bar, catching her breath before carrying another tray. The Friday crowd was restless. Champagne glasses chimed, laughter spilled, and the waitstaff hustled like shadows, unseen yet essential. Janelle's name tag hung crookedly on her black vest. She hadn't noticed until now. She straightened it with a sigh, her feet throbbing after 8 hours on polished floors. "Table 6 wants their Pinot refilled," barked Marcus, the assistant manager. His tone clipped as if she had committed a crime, rather than following the rotation. Marcus's eyes, a pale gray that seemed always to be measuring, never softening, lingered on her with quiet disdain. "Yes, sir," Janelle replied evenly, forcing her voice calm. Inside, her stomach twisted. She'd grown used to his tone, but each word chipped away at her sense of self. She turned, balancing the bottle on her tray, and moved through the tables. As she poured, her mind drifted back to the porch of her childhood home in Queens, to afternoons sitting with Caleb, the deaf boy next door, as his hands danced in the air, a secret language only he seemed to know. She remembered how the neighborhood kids avoided him, how adults pitied him, but she, a curious little girl, had leaned closer, watching, imitating, learning. She never forgot the way his eyes lit up when she signed back for the first time. It had felt like opening a door in a locked room. The memory gave her strength now. Caleb had taught her that invisibility wasn't permanent, that with effort, with compassion, someone could always break through the silence. Still, the grown-up world had its own silence, a heavier, sharper one. The silence of racism wasn't simply about being ignored, it was about being looked at and dismissed, reduced to something less. That night, the silence broke. At 7:43 p.m., the front door opened, and a man in a gray tailored suit entered alone. His steps were steady, deliberate, his salt and pepper hair catching the chandelier's glow. He paused at the host stand, eyes scanning the room. But when he moved his hands, smooth, graceful signs in American Sign Language, the air shifted. Forks paused mid-air. Murmurs rose. A ripple of discomfort moved across the dining room. The hostess froze, eyes wide, unsure. And then, in a voice that cut like a blade, Marcus stepped forward. I'm sorry, but we don't serve people like you here." The sentence didn't just hang in the air, it detonated. Glasses wobbled. A couple at table 3 gasped. The man in the suit, hands still raised mid-sign, stopped as if turned to stone. Janelle's heart slammed against her ribs. She stood across the room with a tray of half-emptied glasses, watching, disbelieving. Her hands tightened on the tray until her knuckles burned. Her throat felt dry, as though swallowing glass. The man's kind eyes flickered, confusion layered with the exhaustion of someone who had lived this before. He signed again, slower this time. "Hello." Table for 1. But no one moved. No one responded. Some guests stared. Others averted their eyes. The silence became a cage, and Janelle could feel its bars pressing against her. Her feet carried her forward before her mind could stop them. She slid past the bar, around the wine rack, until she was close enough that the man could see her clearly. She set her tray down, unclasped her aching fingers, and raised her hands. "Hello, sir. May I help you?" She signed, her movements deliberate, steady. The man's eyes widened. Relief washed across his face, his posture easing as though a weight had lifted. He signed back quickly, gratitude in every motion. "Thank you. I didn't think anyone here would understand me." The room, which moments before had been filled with whispers and stares, went silent again, but this time with shock. Guests leaned closer, trying to decode the flowing conversation. The jazz trio faltered, a note souring before they regained composure. From behind her, Marcus's voice hissed like venom. "Janelle, you're a waitress, not a translator. Stay in your lane." She turned, her heart hammering, but her voice came out calm. "I'm just helping a guest." The man watched, confused but alert, reading the body language around him. Marcus's lips curled. "You're making a scene." Her pulse throbbed in her temples. Every instinct told her to back down, to shrink into silence as she had so many times before. But another voice rose inside her, firm and insistent. The echo of her mother's words on those long Sunday afternoons. "Baby girl, the world will judge you before you open your mouth. So when you do speak, make it count." So she lifted her chin, turned back to the man, and continued signing. And in that moment, Janelle knew this night would not be like the others. Something had shifted. The hum of the restaurant was louder now, a Friday evening rhythm that had a way of swallowing voices, laughter bouncing off crystal glassware and velvet walls. The chandeliers burned brighter, as if determined to outshine the tension brewing just below them. Janelle balanced a tray against her hip as she moved between tables, her mind not entirely on the polished plates and sparkling cutlery. She had seen him, the man at the front, the way his hands shaped meaning in the air, the way the hostess froze. That familiar flicker of recognition hit her chest like a bell rung too close to her ears. Her feet ached, but something deeper stirred. Memory. Caleb, the boy from her childhood who had tried so desperately to sign his thoughts into a world too impatient to notice. She had promised herself back then that she would never ignore such hands. But tonight, she was not a child anymore. Tonight, she was an employee in one of Manhattan's most elite lounges, where rules were enforced not by empathy, but by scrutiny. Brooks. The voice landed behind her like a dropped knife. She turned. Marcus, the assistant manager, towered over her in his steel-gray suit, arms folded, jaw set. His eyes, cold, gray, always calculating, were locked on her as though she were a misstep waiting to happen. "Yes, sir?" she said softly, forcing composure into her tone. "You've been circling the lobby more than the tables," Marcus replied. His words were sharp, but his voice carried just enough restraint to sound professional to anyone listening. To her, it was a warning. Your section is table 6 to 10. Stay there. Don't wander. Janelle swallowed. I was just making sure the hostess is doing her job. Marcus cut in, his lips barely moving. Yours is to serve, not play hero. The sting of the word hero lingered in the air, dripping with sarcasm. Marcus leaned in, voice dropping so only she could hear. You're not here to rescue anyone. You're here to make sure glasses don't go empty. Don't forget that. And with that, he straightened, pivoted, and walked off with the rigid dignity of someone who knew his authority was absolute. Janelle's fingers clenched the tray tighter. She could feel her pulse racing, not from fear, but from restraint. If she let herself breathe the wrong way, he would use it against her. At the front, the man in the charcoal suit still stood, his hands moving carefully, politely, as though each sign were a knock on a door that would not open. The hostess, frozen, blinked and shifted, her red scarf a bright slash against the dimness. Her lips moved in awkward stutters of apology. She couldn't follow. She didn't understand. A couple waiting behind him muttered under their breath. One man, already flushed from too much wine, chuckled to his date. What's this, a mime show? The words knifed the air. Janelle felt it in her gut. She wanted to step forward. Every part of her told her to step forward. But Marcus's voice echoed in her head. Your section is 6 to 10. Stay there. She turned back to her tables, forced a smile onto her face as she poured water for a pair of businessmen who didn't bother looking up. Her hands worked automatically, but her ears strained toward the lobby. She caught fragments, nervous laughter, the stammering hostess, the silence of the man's patience. Finally, she couldn't hold back. She placed the jug of water carefully onto the table, whispered, Enjoy your meal, and pivoted toward the lobby. Janelle slipped between tables, weaving through velvet booths and polished floors until she reached the front. Sir, she said softly, catching his attention. His eyes lifted, gray, kind, but tired. She lifted her hands. Hello? May I help you? She signed. The man blinked once, then his whole face transformed. Relief. His lips parted in the shape of gratitude, his posture straightened. His hands moved with a sudden fluency, words spilling from his fingers. Thank you. I wasn't sure anyone here understood. I just need a table for one. Somewhere quiet. Janelle nodded, her own fingers responding. Of course. Right this way. The hostess stepped aside, eyes wide with disbelief. The couple waiting behind whispered again, but this time their smirks faltered. Something in the man's composure, in Janelle's calm confidence, made mockery feel small. Janelle gestured, guiding him toward a table near the window. She placed the tray down, pulled out a chair with practiced grace, and signed again. Would this be comfortable for you? He smiled. Perfect. Thank you. For a moment, the air felt different. Not hostile, not heavy, just human. But the reprieve did not last. Brooks! The name cracked across the room. Marcus stood by the bar, his eyes like storm clouds. Guests turned to look. Some sensed something brewing. Janelle inhaled, steadying herself, then turned back to the man. Please, excuse me for a moment. She walked toward Marcus, each step measured, as though the floor itself might shatter. Marcus's jaw tightened. What the hell do you think you're doing? His voice was low, but the venom in it was unmistakable. I was helping a guest, Janelle replied, her tone calm, steady. You were showboating. His eyes narrowed. Don't feed me that diversity nonsense. You embarrassed this restaurant. Janelle's chest tightened, but she held his gaze. With respect, sir, he needed someone to understand him. Marcus leaned in, his breath sharp, his words meant to cut. You're not here to understand. You're here to obey. For a long second, neither moved. The room buzzed with chatter and jazz, but around them the air was a wire pulled taut. From his table, the man in the charcoal suit watched. He could not hear Marcus's words, but he could read them, on lips, on posture, on the heat that radiated from the assistant manager's stance. His fingers flexed on the table, a rhythm of frustration. He had been here before, in boardrooms, in hotels, in offices where his silence was mistaken for weakness. But tonight felt different. Tonight, someone had stepped forward. And now that someone was paying the price. His eyes stayed locked on Janelle's back, silently willing her not to shrink. Not to let Marcus win. Janelle inhaled again, slow, deep. I wasn't showboating, she said. Her voice carried now, clear enough for nearby tables to hear. I was doing what this place claims to stand for. Hospitality. Marcus's face reddened. He stepped closer, so close the edge of his suit brushed her arm. You're replaceable, Brooks. Don't forget it. The word replaceable rang in her ears. It was meant to diminish, to erase. But instead, something inside her flared. She thought of her mother's words. The world will judge you before you open your mouth. So when you do speak, make it count. So, she did. I don't believe treating people with dignity makes me replaceable, she replied. The tables nearby had gone quiet. Forks stilled. Glasses paused mid-air. A silence had grown, not heavy, but waiting. Marcus's lips parted to retort, but for the first time, he hesitated. Unbeknownst to either of them, at the far corner of the restaurant, someone else had been watching since the moment the man in the charcoal suit entered. A woman in a dark green power suit, her hair perfectly set, eyes like steel. She had not moved, had not spoken, but she had taken in every detail. The hostess's hesitation, Marcus's venom, Janelle's courage. And though no one yet knew her name, she would change everything. The Silver Oak Lounge glittered, but beneath the chandeliers, a tension simmered. Marcus hovered like a shadow, his gray eyes cold, his voice sharp enough for diners to overhear. Clumsy, he muttered when Janelle dropped a napkin. Showboating, when she signed for the deaf guest. Every word chipped at her dignity. Janelle kept moving, pouring wine, carrying trays, forcing a smile, while humiliation burned inside. She remembered Caleb, her childhood friend, and refused to shrink. The deaf man watched from his table, reading Marcus's lips, his expression tightening with recognition. He had lived this silence all his life. Now, Janelle bore it with him. He raised his hand discreetly, signing thank you. The hostess by the podium still looked shaken, guilt on her face. She knew she had frozen when the guest needed her most, and in the corner, a woman in an emerald suit watched quietly. She saw Marcus's cruelty. She saw Janelle's courage. She said nothing yet, but her eyes promised this would not be forgotten. The Silver Oak Lounge glittered as always, but the air was sharp, heavy. Conversations faltered when Marcus raised his voice. Enough, he barked, pointing at the deaf man. We don't have time for this circus. You're disturbing our guests. Leave, now. Gasps rippled across the tables. The deaf man sat still, his hands trembling, lips pressed into silence, but his eyes, hurt, weary, spoke louder than words. Janelle stepped forward before she could think. Sir, please, he's done nothing wrong. He just wants to order his meal. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she signed, ensuring the man understood every word. Marcus's face reddened, his voice dropping into a hiss. Stay out of this, Janelle. You're a server, not a savior. And that's when the woman in emerald green finally moved. Chairs shifted as she stood, her presence commanding. Her voice, clear and deliberate, cut through the room. No, she is a savior tonight. And you are a disgrace. The lounge went silent. Every eye turned. The truth, long ignored, was laid bare under the golden chandeliers. The silence in the Silver Oak Lounge was deafening. Marcus froze, jaw clenched, but the weight of every stare in the room pressed down on him. His authority, once absolute, now looked brittle under the golden light. The woman in emerald green stepped closer, her eyes unwavering. "I know exactly who you are, Marcus," she said, her tone calm but cutting. "And after tonight, so will everyone else." She turned to Janelle, her voice softening. "And I know who you are, too. Courage doesn't wear a title, and dignity doesn't come with a rank. You've shown." Both Janelle stood still, her chest rising with uneven breaths, trying to absorb the moment. The deaf man looked at her, then at the woman, and lifted his hands, signing slowly, deliberately. "Thank you, both of you." Tears blurred Janelle's vision. For the first time that night, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. Not because Marcus was silenced, but because she had chosen to stand. The woman's gaze swept the room, making sure her words settled into every ear. Prejudice hides in plain sight. But when one person dares to resist, the silence breaks. And when silence breaks, change begins. Marcus turned away, his power shattered. The chandeliers sparkled above, but the true light in the room was carried by the courage that had been witnessed. That night, the Silver Oak Lounge was no longer just a place of glittering luxury. It had become the stage for a lesson that would echo far beyond its velvet walls. Thank you for watching this story. If it touched you, please share it, so more people remember that courage and kindness matter. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe for more powerful stories.
Thank you all for watching this here video. Please like and subscribe and follow. Much love from little Yas to each of you. Content creator making videos on the